We're trying to talk to mayoral candidates to hear their answers on some of the different issues impacting Black people around the city of Boston. Um, this particular event is sponsored by different organizations such as Cotton Square Neighborhood Development Corporation, the Male Engagement Network, Union Minority Neighborhoods, List Boston. We have ABCD Mattapan. We also have Keeping Cotton Square Affordable, Nuestra CDC, and there's more. We'll Sister Circle, a whole bunch of great folks that we'll list out at the end as well.
What is your position on abolishing the BPDA?
Totally. So yes, and I put forward a plan for it. And frankly, the reason why I did that, and why we put out so many really, some people think unnecessarily detailed plans, is that we are used to politics being just words, right? We're used to people saying in every election cycle, this needs to change. And it's been a subject of every mayoral election almost since the BPDA or then BRA was created, where people have said, I'm going to change things, I'm going to get rid of it. And then it never happens because it is an incredibly powerful political tool, right? Our system is so broken now that when the only way you can get something to be built in Boston at a small scale through the ZBA, at a big scale through the BPDA, is by going and getting the blessing of the people who have been appointed by the mayor. It becomes a revolving door of BPDA employees to the biggest corporate actors in our city, a revolving door of developers who used to run the BPDA and be involved with making these decisions, now profiting from and knowing how to work the system. And that's not to say that, everyone, these are the rules that currently exist, right? So who's to fault someone for just trying to work within that system? We need to change the system. And so what I propose is that, one, we need to return the property that's currently owned by the BPDA, that agency is profiting from and self-funding from, back to the city of Boston. That will give us the resources to actually create a planning department like most other cities in the country have, that is accountable to the people, accountable to the city council and to the residents, like every other department is. We are really unique. And sometimes I think, because Boston has been this way for so long, we often aren't looking around to see how different we are. But the level of backdoor negotiation and trading and how long everything takes to get built is unusual. And it is harmful if we're talking about trying to speed things up so more affordable housing can be built, trying to coordinate so that transportation works for everyone and that we are addressing our climate vulnerability. So what would the BPDA be replaced by? An independent planning agency that would actually engage our residents in conversations about how to plan for our future, the important trade-offs that we have to talk through. Do we keep precious open space, or do we use this plot of land for affordable housing that's also badly needed? We can't just jam those decisions down residents' throats based on which developer has shelled out how much money to lay claim to then say they need to make their money back, right? This has to be a coordinated process across all of our neighborhoods. We need to update our zoning code so that the rules are the rules and we can hold to them, so that we are no longer in a situation where 95+% of projects have to go through the ZBA or the BPDA. And most of all, we will see rules that reflect the intersectionality and the scale of need of our communities, right? Affordability, transportation access, food access, where our schools should be built. And so it won't just be a one-off conversation every single time that then leaves us with a mishmash of things that don't make sense, while the communities who can rally and organize and have the luxury and the privilege of fighting things can stay how they are. And then often residents of color or in lower income areas of the city who can't afford to take every single night off of work or being with their families to rally, then have far less say in the system, we need to plan a proactive vision that fits together and that addresses all of our issues together.
I don't think it should be abolished, but I think it absolutely needs major reform. And I know that just from the concerns I've had in my current district on as of right projects that are going up where there's just absolutely no community voice whatsoever, which is ridiculous. And then also projects that the entire community, I stand with them and we oppose and they get approved anyway. So that tells me there is no accountability, there's no predictability, there's no consistency, and there's no transparency. So my plan calls for changing all that. One is on transparency. Right now, good luck trying to find out when a meeting is going to be, where the documents are, what the proposal looks like. All of that can exist online, can be proactively sent out, particularly to civic leaders and residents, long before the actual hearing. It's very difficult to navigate the system to get the information that you would need. We can change that. Residents actually sent me great ideas on specific things we could do to make this agency more transparent that I'm pushing for, frankly, to implement right now. The second is engagement. I actually propose establishing an office of engagement within that department, because not everyone goes to meetings. And yes, we have some great civic associations and civic leaders, but not all of those civic associations are representative of the communities they serve. Not all actually speak various languages. Not all, of course, engage all the residents that may be abutters or that live in that community. And so there really has to be an office whose sole focus is to make sure that we're doing multilingual, multicultural engagement with respect to any development project that's going into someone's community, and doing it proactively and not reactively. So I push to establish that office. The couple other pieces is, one, diversifying who works there. That's a major concern. I've actually engaged with a lot of great planners, and some live in my district who work at the BPDA, and they're excellent at what they do. And everyone says there needs to be a cultural shift, meaning you need greater expertise on certain issues within the BPDA. You need folks who understand financing. You need folks who understand the dynamics of some of these projects and can interact and interface with the community in a better way. That started, I think, a little bit with one of the diversity and inclusion offices, but it needs more work. And the last piece is, yes, I have separating planning from the development side, yes, but the accountability piece. We have a lot of great proposals and ideas out there that say, if you're going to build affordable housing, you're going to do it this way. And if a developer doesn't keep their word on a certain proposal or project, they're then allowed to continue to build or to pull permits. Accountability. We have so many levers in the city of Boston that we can pull to hold folks accountable, especially those we deem to be bad players, bad landlords, bad developers. That is critical. And so I have often talked about in many of my plans, all the levers that are available to us, particularly the mayor's office, to not allow bad players to continue to be able to do business in the city of Boston.
The work that we did in Roxbury and Dorchester through the WSU Neighborhood Initiative was done in large part because we use BPDA tools. We use eminent domain authority to help create a 121A organization. Once again, another BPDA tool. We use the demonstration project, which is another BPDA tool, all to create the largest urban land trust in the country. What the BPDA needs to do is work with the community and have the community lead how you use those tools so that we can move our plans forward. So as mayor, that's exactly what I would do to reorganize the BPDA. We need more community engagement and more community planning that is going to be implemented with the city's tools. And so that when we dream of things, oftentimes when we do community planning, there is a gap between what the community plans and what the private developer can build. Usually some of our nonprofit developers come in and help bring subsidies in to do some of that work, but there's still oftentimes a gap. The city needs to be more aggressive in making sure that we have the right subsidies in place to build what the community has planned for. And as mayor, I will do exactly that, exactly the same way that we try to get as creative as possible at DSNI. I will make sure, in fact, that we're using pilots on behalf of communities. We should be investing for the future of the neighborhood. I will make sure that, in fact, that we use city assets to acquire land so that we can remove that cost out of the equation. So there's a number of things that we can do TIFs, DIFs, that we can make work in ways so that the community's plan could be realized. If we only allow community plans to be implemented by private sector development, we will never be able to build out what the community is asking for because the private sector can't make it work. And so for me, we need to use all those tools to make sure that it works for us. Neighborhood, I've heard from neighborhood after neighborhood, we have to change the notification process for our projects. Right now, the city's asking for developers to notify the neighborhood of meetings and what's happening. I would take that on as a city and make sure that the city is notifying the residents of what's happening, so that when you call me as mayor and you say, John, I didn't know about that, I don't have to go ask the developer whether they told you or didn't. I can take the ownership of that and say, well, here's what we did, or here's what we're going to do better, and here's why you will be notified about these meetings. I think it's incredibly important that we do that. Now, the one thing that I will do to change the BPDA is, in fact, shift the organizational structure where development is responding to community planning. Community planning needs to be the authority at the BPDA, and the development team only needs to bring the tools to the table that is going to respond to community plan. And that should happen because we restructure the authority and who is calling the shots to BPDA.
So I appreciate the question. First we need to extract the planning element of the Boston Planning and Development Agency from it. Planning should be independent from development when we think about the growth of this city. So that's the first place. One, I mentioned a little bit around the developer profiles. We need to make it easier for our residents to engage in the projects and the processes that are happening to and around them. And notification is a big part of that. And certainly the language access, which colleagues on the council have focused a lot of their time on improving and ensuring that we are having greater language access, that we are having greater access to, that the city's people are having greater access to the proceedings, being able to interact in different ways, and really inform the work of our city. I think we need a better master planning process, neighborhood by neighborhood, that includes and prioritizes the voices of residents, the voices of our neighbors, and really respects and honors and celebrates each one of our communities across our city. And then that we fulfill that plan. If we're going to design a plan that will likely include some significant rezoning across our city, that we are then following it. What's happening at the ZBA every week or every other week when they have their hearings, it's projects with variance after variance after variance. And we have to move away from that. We need to make this process more predictable, more logical for both the resident and the developer. That creates a much clearer evaluation of projects and creates better predictability of what's happening in our neighborhoods, what might be happening right next door to you for the resident, and making sure that the space is created at the table for our residents. My sort of roots are, I see Roxanne on here, who I went to high school with. I discovered my political voice in high school and through some student activism as a young person, and then continued to be engaged throughout my younger years as an adult, and eventually became the president of my community civic association, my neighborhood association. So my roots are in resident engagement, community conversation, and community investment and work. And we need to make sure that our neighbors have a seat at the table in designing and redesigning and the work that's happening in their community.